In this video, we're going to talk about rounding. And before we jump into the rounding rules, I want to talk about place value. When you're asked to round a number, you're asked to round to either a certain number of digits or the actual place value. So maybe round to the nearest hundredths place or thousands place. And you need to know where that is if you're going to round. And so we've got this chart here that we're going to fill in together. And it doesn't have all place values on it because we have infinitely many numbers in our number system. So infinitely many place values. But it has enough, the common ones that you're likely to see in your math problems. So I'm going to make up a number, and I'm just going to do that by making up some digits here. Okay, so I just made up the number 34,678,986.4237. And so I'm going to start over here on the left-hand side. We already have 10 millions labeled, but the next place value where you see this 4 is the millions place. And then hundred thousands place is where the 6, the 7 is in the 10 thousands place, and then the thousands, hundreds, tens, this 6 is in the ones place. And then to the right of the decimal is the tenths place. Notice on the right, to the right of the decimal, these ones end in THS, and so that's a good clue if you're ever asked to round to something that ends in THS, that it's a place value to the right of the decimal. And so tenths, hundredths, and then we have thousands and 10,000s. And again, it keeps on going, but this is enough to get us by here. So how to round? So let's look at the rules. So number one, locate the digit to be rounded to the given place value. And so let's do an example using our number. Let's say you were asked to round this number that I made up to the nearest tens place. So looking at our step one, we're going to locate the tens place. So the tens place is where we see this 8. Okay, and then we're going to look at the digit to the right. So I look at the digit to the right of it, which is a 6. And that digit is going to tell us what to do with that 8. And so if the digit to the right is a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, we're going to leave the place value digit alone. That's not the case here, it's a 6. So I'm going to go to B if it is a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. So if the digit's 5 or greater, you're going to bump up the place value digit by 1. And so because the digit to the right is a 6, it tells us to bump this 8 up to a 9. So the 8 is going to become a 9. And so then from here, you need to know, well, what do I do with all the digits to the left of the 9? And then what do I do with all the digits to the right? So the digits to the left always stay the same. So left of place value always stay the same. So I'm just going to copy those down. So this was a 9 and an 8 and a 7, 6, 4, 3. Okay, and then we're going to put in placeholder zeros if necessary, and those are going to go into the right. So make all digits to the right of the place value 0. And some of those zeros are going to be necessary, and sometimes those zeros won't be necessary, but we're going to fill in zeros and then we'll talk about what's necessary and what's not. So out of all of the zeros here, this 0 right here is absolutely necessary, because if that weren't there, this number would be different. Like with this 0 here, we have the number 34,678,990. If this 0 were not here, then this number would not be 34 million, it'd be 3,467,899. And so this 0 is important. On the right, to the right of the decimal place, however, these zeros are not necessary. So almost think about when you have money, for example. If you have 0 cents, you can put 0.00 at the end. But if you don't have 0.00 to the end, it doesn't impact the number at all. And so if I wanted to, I could just not write the decimal place or any of those zeros to the right, and that would be perfectly fine. And so let's jump into some other examples. So for this first example A, for money answers, unless directions say otherwise, we want to round to the nearest penny. It's also known as the hundredths place. So that's two decimals, two decimal places, or two numbers after the decimal place. And so if we're rounding this number, $156.3566, we're going to locate the hundredths place, which is the nearest penny, and that's where you see this 5. And then we're going to look at the digit to the right of that 5, and it's a 6. So because the digit to the right is a 6, it's telling us to bump that 5 up to a 6. So I'm going to make that 5 a 6, and I'm going to write down all of the digits to the left of that because those always stay the same. And then everything to the right of the hundredths place is going to become a 0. Now, this is one of those cases where these zeros, because they're to the right of that decimal place, they're unnecessary. And so my final answer is just going to be $156.36. For B, we're going to round 538.9232 to the nearest hundredths place. And so we're going to count our place values. We've got ones place, tens place, hundreds place. So the 5 is in the hundreds place. I'm going to look to the digit to the right. Since it's a 3, it's less than 5, then this 5 is going to stay the same. I don't bump it up. Everything to the right becomes zeros. Okay, and then all of the zeros to the right of the decimal, those are unnecessary, so I can just write 500. For C, 538.9232, let's do the to the nearest hundredths. So notice this ends in THS. That's different than hundreds place. So the hundredths place is to the right of the decimal. So we have the tenths place, and the hundredths place is going to be where this 2 is. And so I'm going to look to the right of the 2. It's a 3, so since it's a 3, that tells me to leave the 2 alone, and then I write all of the numbers to the left are going to stay the same. So I write 538.92, and then all of the digits to the right of the place value become 0. And since these zeros are to the right of the decimal place, I don't need to include those in my answer, so I'm going to write 538.92. And then the last problem, we're going to round to 2 decimal places. So this is a little different. We're not given the place value name, but just 2 decimal places, which means 2 numbers after the decimal place. So that means I'm going to round this place value right here. And so I'm going to look to the right, and because that's a 9, that's going to tell us to bump up that 2 to a 3. And then all the other digits stay the same. And then the numbers to the right become 0. Since these zeros are to the right of that decimal place, they're unnecessary. So my final answer is just going to be 124.23.